But in futurist terms, I would call what we are talking about right now a pocket of the future in the present. And you're deep in research, talking to folks who this is like their day to day presence, and you're thinking about this. And I studied this as well. But that's because we're attracted to this and we're interested and we're like living in the future in this little moment. And that's why I like William Gibson has a quote: the future's already here, it's just unevenly distributed. So we're in one of these little unevenly distributed pockets of the future. And we're like, why are people like paying more attention to this? Because they're they're living some other pocket of the future, or maybe not even the future, in the present, whatever, you know? So, and also, Joe, this isn't the only big future thing that might be happening. It feels like that to us and probably to you because you're deep in that research. But, other people are looking at other things, and you got to realize that they're focused on other things, which is another point. It's like the future isn't, no one's in control of the future. No one can say, this is going to happen, and I have all the resources and I can make it happen. Because you're specifically at quantum, you're looking, you're researching, there's a whole lot of stuff happening. There's governments, there's private companies, there's nation states, there's organizations, there's like, your impact with satellites, there's impact with other things. Like even within this topic area, there's a lot going on. And so none of the people and the players in that space have control over the trajectory of how quantum's going to like unfold into present moment. And that I think is a really important understanding. Like the future is this kind of fluid, movable thing, but we can influence it. Like you and everyone you're talking to in quantum right now have a tiny bit of leverage points, that you have a tiny bit of leverage. You can kind of leverage it. You would doing your research, highlighting your points. You're going to be able to say, these are the things you might want to have recommendations. You definitely will probably have security recommendations for your security friends. And you might be able to have positively influence the adoption of quantum resistant technology within your circle. And that's you being able to take this knowledge and influence the future. And that's like what I'm trying to do, helping people understand how they can be empowered by knowing this stuff. And I didn't expect to come in and have like a such a clear case, like of, you might not think that you are working and influencing the future, but you really are in this specific area that you're passionate about. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting, and I have a bad habit of, like, when I get bored, I start trying to challenge myself and learn new things and whatnot, and so I think that this is kind of what came of it. Heather, we kinda just dove right in, right, without telling, your background, right? What's your story? Like, what made you wanna get into the IT field overall? And
Mhm.
it sounds like you're a bit specialized with security, but with some other things as well, being a futurist and whatnot. And I want to hear all about what that is and what that means.
Okay, so I'm going to try to keep it short, but I can kind of be a talker sometimes. When you ask me like what got me into this, well, I landed in San Francisco 1996 and my first job was at a startup. And so I kind of just got started into that. And then you know, one of my favorite films that came out shortly afterwards was the original Ghost in the Shell. And that has, it's set in Japan. It's like, a little bit of espionage, really questioning like the human identity, the technology identity. And I've always been really curious about how technology augments and extends and helps us create our personal identities. And so I've always been on the internet. And so also being on the internet and like when I was in college, my first website was in 1992, 93, and I had to like learn how to code HTML and upload it on a VAX system and stuff like that. So then doing HTML and movable type and blogging, like I've known all that kind of stuff in the back. So understanding how all that goes around. I worked in tech and I always found myself attracted to companies that were doing cool new things that were ahead of their time. They were ahead of their time in that they were not financially successful when I was involved. Oftentimes later, they would be really successful. I was a DHTML evangelist in 1999 and 2000, which ended up being Ajax. It was a whole new way of how do you build the web and how do you build interactive web technologies that had a different type of relationship with the client and the server rather than back in the old days when you hit a new web page, you hit the server, it recreated the web page from scratch. And so you'd have long load times. And then anyway, this technology really changed it. And so it wasn't just about the new technology and what it could do. It was getting people to adopt it and realize that, oh, hey, we can adopt it and it's better and it's going to be more improving. Let's fast forward. I got tired of working for startups that were ahead of their time and not making any money. So I tried to figure out what could I do where I could stay naturally attracted to the future. And I met someone at a conference, told them what I did, and they said, "You're a futurist." I said, "That's crazy. What's that?" And then a couple years later, I went back and I got my master's of science in strategic foresight. Strategic foresight or a futurist is both an art and a science. It is both studying research and then putting patterns together, understanding patterns, looking at trends, extrapolating them out into the future, creating little stories about the future, understanding that the future hasn't happened yet. And that if you understand certain trend lines, you might be able to influence them. Why would you want to do all of that? Say, because you might want to make better decisions in the present moment. I like to use the nerdy analogy. Being a futurist or teaching someone to think like a futurist allows you to see the Klingon ship decloak just a little bit sooner before everyone else. So you can react to it. You can have kind of it's almost in some ways like how you do tabletop games in order to be familiar with different scenarios. So when you do have an incident come up, you don't freak out. You're a little bit more relaxed. Well, you do the scenario planning, you think about these scenarios in order to understand what the future could be. So as you start to identify and then say, oh, is that what we want? If you're working for a company or in a specific security thing, you could say, okay, well, if this thing shifts, that might mean we're going to get more attacks here or more impact here or more attention or scrutiny here. So we can watch that trend and see how that might happen. Unfortunately, not a lot of people have the kind of bandwidth to be able to think that way because we're just so busy dealing with fires. I officially got my re-entrance into cybersecurity as we know it today in about 2014 or 15. I was doing a project for the US Army, was about teaching, was a future teaching module. And the topic that we used in that teaching module was cybersecurity because, cyber warfare, the biggest warfare that we're happening right now. And in the process of going through that, of course, I was watching all these DEF CON videos and I came across Chris Rock's, what was it? How he hacked into a country. And I thought, who's this crazy guy? This crazy, audacious guy. Like, what the hell? Is it for real? This just sounds too crazy. So yeah, of course I had to learn more. A few years later, fast forward, I partnered up with a friend of mine, Bob Blakely, and we wrote a paper for the new security paradigms workshop, which basically took all my strategic foresight methodology and applied it to cybersecurity. And I just pulled it up over here. It's called Shifting Paradigms Using Strategic Foresight to Plan for Security Evolution. Because I had this theory. I was like, okay, if we can anticipate what the future could be, maybe I can help security folks secure things better. And so we came up with all these scenarios, and I came up with 12 new paradigms based on old paradigms.